Hey everybody, it's Edie and welcome to day 10 of The Awakening. Today we will create the first of 3 paintings in the series, and we will be working on a lotus flower painting. So far we've talked about all the things that bring us joy and happiness, and doing more of those things to kind of help us get out of that rut, or to reawaken our spirit and reawaken that passion inside of us, and get out of the stuck place that we've been in. And I just thought the symbolism of the lotus flower was perfect to work with this week, because a lotus flower actually grows in the swamp, in this murky, gross water. It grows its whole life below water, coming up through the muck and mud and, fish guts and all that stuff. And it fights its way to the top of the water, and it breaks the surface, and that's actually where it blooms, and it's completely perfect. Nothing on the inside is dirty. It doesn't have a speck of anything on it but beauty, and it fights its way up to the top to release that beauty. And that's kind of what we're getting back to. We've been stuck in this place of doing the same thing day in and day out, and real life takes over, and then we don't bring that joy and that beauty back into our lives. And so that's kind of what this painting is going to represent. So far we've talked about those things and started to incorporate them back into our daily life, and now we're just going to take it even further and really awaken that passion inside of us, and really awaken all of the joy and things that make us thrive. So we're going to work on this lotus flower painting this week, and I'm actually going to be working on a canvas. I'm using a 12 by 16, and I know that may freak some of you out because you may not work in anything besides a journal, or you may work a lot smaller than this, but I'm really going to challenge you to step out of your comfort zone and actually use a canvas if you don't normally use canvas, and to use a large canvas. If this size canvas doesn't scare you, then I want you to go to a size that does scare you, because going from this point on, we're going to be stepping out of that comfort zone and pushing ourselves to really break free of this hold that this rut has on us. So I'm going to challenge you starting today to step out of your comfort zone and go larger than you normally would. So if you normally work in a journal, I'm challenging you to work on a canvas. If you normally work on a canvas, I challenge you to work on a size that's larger than what you would normally choose to work on. Another thing I'm going to challenge you to do is use really large brushes. I normally use paint brushes about this size. That's the largest, real quality paintbrush that I own. But I picked these up because these are way bigger than anything I normally use. I use things like this if I'm doing an extremely big canvas, but I wouldn't normally use something like these paintbrushes on this size canvas. So I'm stepping out of my comfort zone and using these really large paintbrushes, at least on the background. Once we get to the flower, you will need smaller paintbrushes so that you can get the detail that you want on your flower. But for your background, I really recommend that you step out of your comfort zone again and use paintbrushes or sponges or whatever that are larger than you would normally use. Because if you're working small, this is a large paintbrush to you. But if you're stepping out and doing something that's really big like this, then a paintbrush that's this large is going to help you get that background covered and just kind of step out of what you normally do. And that's what this whole process about. This whole 30 days is just about getting out of that stuck place, because you've been doing the same thing over and over again. And even if it's something as small as using a different size paintbrush, it's going to get you out of what you normally do and stepping into something that's going to awaken your spirit and just make you come alive again. So come on down to the desk and let's get started. Before we get started on our actual painting, I wanted to talk a little bit about the paints that you will see me use here. You have a supply list, and that is to tell you the brands of paint and the colors that I used in my exact painting, so that if you're following along and creating a similar painting, then you'll know what I used and you can get similar results. However, I don't want you to feel like this is the end-all be-all of what you can use in these paintings. This is the first of 3 paintings in the series, and the supply list covers all of the paint colors that we'll use for all 3 paintings. But if you don't have these colors, don't feel like you have to rush out and buy these colors. Use what you've got. And you may not even use these colors. You may want to create a painting that looks nothing like mine, and that's absolutely fine. But if all you have on hand is the cheapy craft paints, please feel free to use whatever you have on hand. You don't have to go out and buy everything that's on the supply list. If nothing else, I would really recommend that you purchase the canvases, and you can usually find those fairly inexpensive at places like Michael's and AC Moore, especially if you use a coupon, and a really large paintbrush. And you can find these usually even at like your dollar store. I got these at Jerry's, and it was buy one get 3 free, and it was $1.09. So I basically spent, you know, 30 cents on this big paintbrush. So it doesn't have to be big expensive items and quality paintbrushes. So I just wanted to put that out there, and don't feel like you have to use the exact colors that are on the supply list. Make a painting that's going to bring you joy. Alright, let's get started. I want to start my background, and we're going to work from dark to light. And I just want some depth in the background of my painting. The center of it won't even be seen, but we still want depth in our background. So I'm using Liquitex Basics Dioxazine Purple, and I'm just kind of dabbing it on there, and then I'm going to go back and do the exact same thing with, I can't pronounce this long word, phthalo cayenne, I think, blue. It's phthalo blue. But again, if you don't have this color, you just want a nice deep purple and a nice deep blue. Or you may not want these colors, whatever. So I have my large paintbrush here, completely dry. I've never used this paintbrush before. I just took the plastic off of it. And I'm just going to swipe up and down, back and forth to get the paint spread out and to kind of get my canvas covered a little bit. Oops. You want to go the same direction to begin with. Don't forget to paint the edges of your canvas. You want to do all 4 edges. You can kind of bring the paint down around the edge, like so. And in the end, you probably won't see much of these dark colors, but it's going to create such depth and beauty in the finished product of your painting. So it's important that you start with this darker color on the background. So I'm going to leave this just going up and down. I want to thin it some more, so I'm just going to take my paintbrush back and forth over the entire thing, just covering any white areas and thinning that paint a little bit more. Okay, now I'm going to take my same dry paintbrush and just go side to side and fill in any of these white areas. If you feel like your canvas is dipping down in the center, you can put something up underneath it. I usually keep a large book or 2 up underneath my canvases to fill this center piece here so that I'm not pressing down on my canvas. So I'm just going to grab a book real quick and slide it up underneath my canvas. So I just have 2 books that I've stacked here, and I'm going to place my canvas right back over the top of those. You just want to make sure that when you paint across, that whatever you have underneath your canvas is not poking back up through. So for example, if I was to put another magazine on top of this and then try to press down, you can see right here, I hope you can see, that I'm getting the outline of the books. You don't want that because that will affect your canvas and that will affect your overall painting. So you want to make sure that it's either just flush or just below the surface of your canvas, so when you're pressing down, you don't get the marks of whatever you've put underneath your canvas. Preferably you want to have something that's the exact size of the center hole in your canvas, but If you don't, you can always slide your canvas back and forth and work with it that way. So I still have a little bit of white here. I'm going to add just a tiny bit more blue. I'm actually just going to add it right onto my paintbrush. Kind of dab that on. And then go back with the up and down strokes. And I'm really kind of working it into the canvas. Now my canvas is pre-gessoed. That's also something to keep in mind. If your canvas is not gessoed to begin with, you need to give it a good coat of gesso before you get started. One more little bit right here. And take some of that and put it over here. And if you've got something protecting the center of your canvas, don't be afraid to get in there and really work that paintbrush into the canvas. Okay, so it doesn't have to be completely covered. I'm pretty happy with that. I do want to touch up right here a little bit. Because it's right on the edge. I'm not so worried about the center. As long as there aren't any large white gaps. Now before this dries, I just want to spritz it with some water. I have quite a bit of water on there. This is going to allow my lighter colors to swirl around a little bit more and blend with these darker colors that I've just put on here. So I'm going to start with a few little dabs, just like we did before, just not quite as much paint this time. Just all over the canvas. And this is light blue permanent Liquitex Basics. And then I'm going to use a little bit of the bright aqua green Liquitex Basics. And you just want a variety of blues and purples and greens and aquas and teals. I'm going to blend these just like I did with the darker colors, using that straight up and down motion. Now is when you want to make sure you're starting to fill in those white bits. So if you do have white showing through, you want to make sure you're starting to fill those in. And I'm just keeping this straight, up and down, up and down. And I'm using the flat side of my paintbrush for the most part, just going straight back and forth. But on occasion, if I have a white spot or a line that I really need to fill in, I'll turn my paintbrush vertically and get into the groove, but then I'm back horizontal using those wide, light, back and forth strokes just to blend the paint together. And my paintbrush is losing bristles, so you'll see me periodically picking off the bristles. And that may happen, especially if you're using synthetic paintbrushes. It's normal. It's part of the job. Just pick them off and keep on going. See here, I'm just like blending right into that spot, that white spot. And then whenever I go back in with the vertical rough brush strokes like this, I still go back with the wide stroke to blend it back in. So I'm going to now brighten this up a little bit more, so I'm going to spritz it again with water. Good bit of water on there. This time I'm going in with Brilliant Yellow Green, doing our same little polka dots everywhere. Doing a bit more of the green this time. and back in with more of the light blue permanent. If you get some large paint drops and some tiny paint drops, that's okay. That's just going to give even more dimension and a more cohesive look to your painting, because it's not all going to be exactly perfect. I'm just blending. Now I kind of like these brush strokes in here, and I'm not liking this blended end down here quite as much. So what I want to do is add a tiny bit more of the green. Very tiny little drops this time. But you do need the paint to actually come out. There we go. And then a tiny bit more of the blue. And it's just back and forth until you get the look that makes you happy. Okay? So now I'm not going to blend as much. I'm going to do more of this brush stroke look. So I'm just going in one direction and stopping. I'm not blending it in. I'm brushing it down and then just leaving it alone to do what it wants to do. Okay? Now I'm really starting to like this, so I think I want to let this dry before we add the next layer. Now if you're doing these brush strokes, you want to make sure that they're all going the same direction and that you don't have any little marks or divots going in a different direction. So I'm going to let this dry and then I'll be back. My background is completely dry. So now we're going to start creating the real background. Everything we've done up to this point is to create some depth and layers in our painting, but now we're basically going to cover all of this up. So you need to be okay with letting this go. And we're going to talk more about stepping out of our comfort zone in one of the other paintings, but for some people this is going to be stepping out of your comfort zone. But you know, this whole awakening process is about all of that, stepping out of our comfort zone, getting out of the rut, and bringing joy into our lives. So cover it up. It's okay. Let it go. Let it go. If you need to, take a photo of it so that way you have this background that you can print or work with again later on. But for now, you need to let it go. So what we're going to do is, I have Matisse Flow. This is Cobalt Teal. If you don't have the Matisse Flow, you can also use Golden Fluid Acrylics, or you can add glazing medium, or even water if you have to whatever paint you do have. Now you'll notice I've put on my gloves, and I know people are going to ask why, so I'm just going to tell you now. Some of the paints that I'll be using have things in them that are not very good, and you should not get it on your skin. You should not have continued exposure to it. So I'm not sure which of my paints have that in there, which of them don't, and a lot of artists don't talk about that. They just work either with their bare hands or they've used some sort of invisible glove, but they're not talking about that. So I just wanted to let you all know that I am aware that some of the paints that we use are not good for us, and so that's the reason for the gloves. I do have the invisible glove lotion, but I just decided to put the gloves on today because I just didn't want to put the lotion on. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing that we did in the beginning with our teal paint. So we're going to completely cover the background with this teal paint. Remember, you're adding to your edges as you're creating this entire painting. And I don't really have enough paint on my paintbrush right now, but that's fine. Okay, so while this is wet, we're going to spray it down with water, just like we did before. Quite a bit of water. Go back over it again with the paintbrush to get rid of any marks, unless you want to leave them in there. But I want to cover those marks up. This is going to help spread my paint a little bit more. Remove the bristles. Now, while this is really wet, if it feels like it's drying a little bit, add some more water. While it's really wet, you want to take a paper towel or a baby wipe or something, a cloth of some sort, and press down. Remember, you need to make sure you have something underneath your canvas, and then lift off. It's going to create texture, visual texture. It's going to make marks in your background. So you need to keep that in mind when you're selecting what you're going to blot your painting with. Make sure you can feel those books underneath your canvas. Otherwise you're going to press down and then you're going to have a dent in your canvas and you're going to be mad at me because I didn't tell you to put something under your canvas. So I'm telling you now, put something under your canvas. If you feel like there's still too much of that teal showing up, spray it with more water and continue to blot. If you're happy with it, we're going to move on to the next step. If you like the marks that are in your painting and you want them to stay where they are, you need to dry your painting at this point. If you don't like the marks and you want to smooth them out, do not dry your painting at this point. I like my marks, I'm going to dry my painting, and then I'll be right back. My background is dry, so I want to mix up my next color. I'm just taking some cobalt teal, and this is Liquitex Soft Body. And I want to add in just a drop or two of phthalo green. This is phthalo green blue shade. Golden fluid acrylics. And you can see I just did one little drop here with a dab of my cobalt teal. And you're going to have to play with this to get the color you want. Just blend them together. Now that's just a little bit too deep and too dark, so I'm just going to add some white. And I'm using Soho acrylic, but you can use Liquitex Basics or whatever you've got on hand. I have my color all mixed up, and I have drywall tape. You can use sequin waste, you can use any other stencil that you've got. I'm just going to take my little spouncer and spounce on some dots. And then as soon as I finish spouncing, I'm going to spritz it with water and blot some of it back off. You want them to be very faint, and you don't want them to be perfect. So I'm going to finish it in this corner here. So you can see, even though I just applied them, they're very, very faint, and they're not perfect. And you just want to go back and forth, applying your whatever stencil you're using, and then blotting it back off. Spritz it with water, and then blot. Make sure you're not twisting your paper towel. You just want to blot. And on the areas that you want to remove, you can kind of twist a little bit there. But for the most part, you just want to blot and not twist. You just want the hint of that stencil to show up in your background. So I have the line of my canvas edge here, and I want to make sure I cover that up. So that's right where I'm going to spounce this next little bit. See, it blends it right in and covers it up. You want to always take your stencil off the edge of your canvas. You don't want to just stop and have your stencil be on a perfect line or only in the center of your canvas. You just want to blot until that stencil is barely noticeable. It's just a hint. It's just to give some visual interest. Because your flower is really your focal point. And so you don't want your background to have so much going on that you can't even pay attention to the focal point. But you don't want it to be just boring and plain either. So just continue working with your background, putting your paint on with your stencil, and then spritzing with water and blotting it back off. I'm going to finish doing my background and I will be back. My background is all nice and dry, so now I want to start adding the focal point to my painting. And the focal point is the Lotus Flower. So you'll notice that this template is in the Facebook group. If you go to the Awakenings Facebook group, under the Files tab, there is a PDF document with this template available for you. So all you need to do is print this image to use in your painting. Now there are a few ways that you can go about adding the lotus flower to your painting. You can Google search lotus flower and a ton of images will come up. So if you don't want to draw or paint your lotus flower, then all you need to do is Google it, find an image that you like, print it out, and then you can just collage on the image that you find. You can fussy cut around the flower and collage it on, and then it'll blend right into your painting. You can do the same thing, Google the images, find one that you like, and then draw that image. Or you can do the technique that I'm going to show you here in order to transfer your drawing directly to your canvas. So all of those things you can do with this template as well. You can cut it out directly and collage it on and then paint directly over it. Even if you print an image from Google that has color in it, if you print a color image, you can still paint over the top of that. So if you find a lotus flower that you really like, you can always just print the image and then go back and paint over it. So let me tell you, I'm just going to fix this one little section right here. I don't really like the way that looks. There we go. So let me just explain to you the technique that I'll be using here. I'm actually going to transfer this image directly onto my canvas. So I'm going to basically draw my lotus flower onto my canvas. Now it's pretty much impossible to see through this canvas. So I could, even with a light box, you probably couldn't see to trace your lotus flower. If you were to put this image underneath your canvas like so, with a light box underneath it, you wouldn't be able to see your image to trace it. So how do we get this image basically traced onto our canvas? What you want to do, first of all, again, make sure you've got those books or something underneath your canvas because you're going to be pressing down and you don't want to press into your canvas and create dips and divots on it. Once you have your image printed out, you want to take a Sharpie or some other marker that's going to bleed through and go over the entire, the entire image. And just trace directly over the lines. I completely traced around my lotus flower, and if you mess up, that's okay. It's not that big of a deal. We'll be able to fix this later. So you can see, like right here, I have 2 different lines. It's really kind of messed up right there. It's fine. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect. You just need to be able to see your lines through the back side of your paper. So you want to make sure that you're using a marker that bleeds. That's why I recommend the Sharpies, because you'll be able to see exactly what you drew on the back side whenever the time comes. Now what you want to do is take a very soft pencil. I'm using a 6B here. If you have an 8, that's even better, but I'm using the 6B, and what you want to do is go right back over these lines yet again with your pencil, and you want to use a very firm hand. You want to go over it a few times, because what you're trying to do is actually get some graphite back onto the page. You need some good thick graphite here, because you're going to be transferring that graphite onto your canvas and you need it to show up. So you want to use a nice soft pencil and a good firm hand. And don't be afraid to like color over it a few times. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to follow those lines, because you'll be able to fix all of this once you get it onto your canvas. And you want to, after you go through and color all of your graphite lines, you want to kind of tilt your paper around to make sure you've got them all covered with graphite. So you can see the shiny lines here. That's the ones that have the graphite on them, and then you can see where the line stops. There's no graphite there. So don't be afraid to like pick your paper up and tilt it and make sure you've got the entire flower outlined, so that you don't miss any spots with your graphite. So I'm just going to finish coloring this with my graphite, and then I'll be back to show you how to transfer it onto your canvas. My flower is completely traced again with the graphite pencil. So now I'm ready to actually transfer my flower onto my canvas. However, an important note here. Whenever you do this technique, you need to decide ahead of time which side, or excuse me, which way you want your flower to face. So for example, I've printed my flower, and then I went over it with the Sharpie and over it with the graphite on the front of my page, and this was the back of my paper. So all I'm seeing is the bleed through of the Sharpie on the back side of my page. There's nothing else on the back side of this page. So whenever I get ready to put my flower onto my canvas, I have to flip it over, which actually inverts my flower. That may not matter to you, but it's something important to keep in mind, especially if you're using an image besides a flower. If you need certain things to face a certain way, then you need to keep this in mind. So this is how it comes out printed, and then when I flip it over, that's how it's going to look on my canvas. Now, if you want your flower to look like this on your canvas, what you'll do is print it as you did, go over it with the Sharpie, just as before, and you'll flip it over and do the graphite on the back side, like so. And again, you want to use a heavy hand with that graphite. It's the same exact technique, it's just a matter of which way you want your flower to face when you put it down on your canvas. So I'm going to finish going over this side now with the graphite, and then I'll be back to show you how to transfer your image to your canvas. Just another quick note, if you make the mistake and do your Sharpie and graphite on the wrong side, no big deal. Just flip it over and do the graphite on the back side of your flower. Just make sure you're not on your canvas whenever you get ready to do the graphite on the backside, because the point of this is to transfer the graphite, and it will transfer onto your canvas. I mean, you can totally erase it. It's not that big of a deal. It's just, why do that step if you don't have to, if you can avoid it? So, if you do your graphite and then go to transfer your image and decide it's backwards, it's no big deal. You just fix it. You just do it on the back side. Just make sure, again, you're not on your canvas. Okay, so I've determined which way I want my flower. Now I need to figure out the placement of my flower on my canvas. So I'm just going to kind of place it here. There. So I've got my flower where I want it. Now I'm going to take the blunt end of a paintbrush. This is just a regular little paintbrush. And I'm going to trace over those lines again. And you're going to really press into it, because now you're trying to get that graphite to come off of your paper and go onto your canvas. So I'm just going to do a few of the lines here and show you what I'm talking about. And your hands are going to get dirty, especially if you're a lefty. You can see I've got graphite like all over the side of my hand. So you want to press hard again. You want to be heavy-handed here and really press that graphite off of your paper and onto your canvas. So I'm just going to lift it up a little bit here. It's good to lift it up and check, but you don't want to move your paper. You don't want to pick it up, because you're never going to get it in the same spot again. You may even want to tape like 2 or 3 of your corners down so that your paper doesn't move and slide as you're working. You just want to make sure you're using something that's not going to peel your paint off, so painter's tape or washi tape or something that's got very little adhesive to it. Don't use Scotch tape or duct tape or anything that's got a lot of stickiness to it, because when you peel this off, it'll peel your paint off. So it's good to keep lifting and checking. So I recommend taping 2 corners down, and that way you can always lift to see how you're coming along with your painting or with your graphite. So you can see my image is transferring here. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to be able to go back over this and fix any mistakes and fill in any blanks that didn't transfer, and shape up our flower and make sure that it's pretty, and you know, that all the lines are there and everything looks as it should. So go around your entire flower and really press and get that graphite off of your paper and onto your canvas. Make sure you've got something underneath your canvas. So I'm just going to finish going around my entire flower here, and then I'll be back to show you the next step. Now we need to make our image a little bit more permanent. I personally do not like graphite. It's great for this kind of technique. It's amazing for graphite pencil drawings. However, as a rule, I don't like graphite to draw with. I like it as a first layer, but then I like to go back over the graphite and then erase the graphite, because graphite smears and it can make things look dirty and smudgy to me, which, you know, if you're doing a graphite painting, that's exactly what you want. But, you know, for example, something like this, you don't want gray graphite smeared in with your paint. So what we're going to do is go back over with something that's permanent. You can do this with a marker. You can do it with like a Prismacolor pencil or an ink pen. You just need something that's permanent, because we're going to go back and then erase the graphite. I personally love Prismacolor pencils for this, because you can use whatever color your painting is going to be, and then the pencil is just going to blend right into your painting. It's not going to smudge and smear, but it's also not going to be standing out against your painting. So now what you want to do is go over your image one more time with your permanent, whatever it is that you're using. Now this could be your pen, a marker, Prismacolor, whatever. And you want a contrasting color to your background, preferably whatever color you're going to be using in your actual painting. And again, when you're going back over this, this is where you're really fine-tuning those lines, fixing, correcting, tweaking, making sure that your flower looks the way you want it to look. It's a good thing to have your original handy here as well in case some of your graphite lines were a little bit wonky or not showing up. Just keep your original handy so that way you're not adding any extra lines unless you want them there. But that way you get a good representation of your image. And remember, this technique can be done no matter what image you're using. You don't have to be using my template. You don't even have to be doing a lotus flower. This is for any image that you need transferred onto any canvas at any time ever. For this class or any other project that you're doing. Now that we have our Prismacolor on here, you just want to take an eraser, and I like to use either the flat outside edge or the flat top or bottom of my eraser. And you just want to gently go back and erase the graphite lines. You're not pressing hard here. You're not trying to really erase everything. You just want that graphite to be erased. So you're not trying to erase your Prismacolor here. So just gently go over your whole flower to get that graphite off of there. Now we want to start filling in the color of our flower. You can go about this two ways. I'm going to be using Liquitex Basics, and some of the colors are more transparent than others. If you don't want any of your background to show through here, then I would suggest putting a clear coat of gesso over the top of your flower before you begin this next step. However, if you don't mind if some of the background shows through, or if you just want to give it that extra depth and color like an underpainting, then just leave it as it is and start with your flower colors right over the top of this. So it's just a matter of how you want your paint to work in these next steps. So I'm using Liquitex Basics Cad Yellow Medium, and I'm just going to start painting in my flower. And I'm just going to follow right in all of the lines and completely paint the entire flower. The whole thing is going to have this yellow base color. And if you're letting your background show through, you may have to give this a couple of coats. Because like right now my flower's looking kind of green. That's not really the color I'm going for. But I wanted those blues to be there just as like the underpainting, just to give my flower some depth. It's all going to end up being covered up in the end, but for now I want the blue to show through, because in some places it's going to look really nice where it's kind of peeking through there with a little bit of that greenish tint. So I'm a fussy painter. You can see I use a really small paintbrush and lots of little strokes. Whenever I'm painting details like this, I'm an extremely fussy painter. If you want your flower to be more free-flowing and more organic, I guess, then you may not want to be so particular about painting in all the little petals. You may just want to throw some paint around. And that's great. Do that. This painting should be a reflection of what brings you joy. So if bright, vivid, messy paint makes you happy, then do that. So I'm just going to finish painting in my flower with this base coat of yellow. And then once I have this all painted in, I will be back to show you the next steps. I just finished painting the first coat of the cad yellow onto my flower, and you can see right now it looks really dull and green and, you know, kind of muddled, but that's okay. This is just our first layer. We're going to actually go over this a couple of more times with the yellow to get our base color down, and then we're going to start adding in some reds and oranges and maybe some purple and really brightening this flower up. So if your flower looks dull to begin with, that's okay. It's not going to keep looking like this. Now, what you want to do is let this first paint layer dry completely. This is your base coat. If you're not using gesso, this is going to kind of work as your gesso. It's your priming layer for your flower. So you want this to be completely dry, and then once it's dry, we're going to come back and start adding more yellow and brightening this flower up quite a bit. I hit my flower with the heat gun, so it's completely dry. I'm going to go back in and start adding more yellow. Now this time I'm going to put it on my palette because I'm not sure how much paint I'm going to need, and I'm not sure when I'm going to start blending. So I'm going to work from my palette and just go over the entire flower one more time with the cad yellow. And you want to make sure that you can still see your lines. If they start to disappear a little bit, wipe the paint off if you need to. You've always got your original to go back to that you can fix these lines in the end, but it's just really helpful to have them there as a guide as you're painting. So you can see it's already starting to brighten up a bit. So you want to go back and paint the entire flower with the yellow again. Now if you're using gesso, you probably won't have to do as many layers because the gesso is your primer. So that's totally up to you, you know, how many layers you want to add to your flower. So I'm going to finish painting this in, and then I will be back. I'm pretty happy with the way my painting is coming along so far. Don't worry, if your lotus flower starts to look like a head of cabbage or a head of lettuce, it's okay. It's not going to look like that in the end. But trust me, you're going to be happy that you have these darker undertones because that's really going to help your shading be a heck of a lot easier. So don't stress if it looks like a head of lettuce. So now I want to start bringing in some more brightness and covering up some of this shadow effect. So I'm going to give my flower a coat of clear gesso. I'm just going to paint the whole thing. This is going to allow me to start laying paint on top of what I've done so far. You just want to make sure that your second coat of yellow is dry before you add your clear gesso over the top. If you put white gesso over the top, it's going to fade everything out. That's not what you want. You want those shadows to still be seen. I mean, you can use white gesso if your flower is just too dark and you need to brighten it up and lighten it up. You can use white gesso here, but it's going to basically white out your painting. Just keep that in mind. Okay, once you have your flower completely coated in the gesso, You want to let it dry completely. Now you can see it kind of has this milky look to it right now, but once my gesso is dry, all that's going to disappear. So I'm going to hit this with the heat gun and then we'll be back. Now we want to start adding some brightness to our flower. So I'm just going to take my same cad yellow and now I'm going to add some titanium white to it just to lighten it up a little bit. The titanium white is also going to make my yellow not quite so transparent. It's going to make it a little bit more opaque, which is going to give me a little bit more coverage. I think I want a little bit more white in there. You want to make sure you really blend your paint together so that you don't have streaks or some areas that are lighter or darker than others. That's good. Now we want to go over our flower again with this brighter yellow, and you don't want to go all the way to the edge. You want to go just before the edge. And if your paint's a little bit too thick, you can add some water to it, which is what I'm going to do right here. And I just dip my paintbrush into my water, and that's going to give me a little bit more blendability. You can also add glazing medium right here. Now, to get this soft effect here, you want to kind of take your paintbrush and just barely touching the canvas. Give it these little back and forth. Almost a scrumbling, but with very little pressure. And you're just taking this paint up to the edge now. So that way it's still shaded. You can still see your underpainting, but you're getting that lighter yellow all the way up to the edge. And if your paint seems too thick, just add some water or glazing medium. I'm actually going to just spray some water right into my paint here and mix it up a little bit. Because I'm not trying to cover everything I've already done. You want your paint to be fairly thin and wet here, but not so thin that you're creating a wash. You still want it to be paint. But you still want to also be able to see your underpainting. So remember, you're going almost to the edge, and then once your paintbrush is pretty much out of paint, you go back with this very light, feathery, scrumbling motion and taking the paint to the edge. If you need to, you can always add some water. To thin it out even more. And you just do this for your entire flower, except for right here in the center. You're going to leave this with the dark underpainting, because we're going to come back with just some plain cad yellow over that, because we want the center to be very dark. But for everything else, you want to completely paint it again with this lighter, brighter mix of white and yellow together. And if you start to cover up your lines, it's okay, just wipe them off a little bit. And never fear, you still have your original that you can go back and fix any lines that you need to later on. And don't forget to go back and do this little feathering right at the edge. See, it's already starting to brighten up and look much better now. So I'm going to finish painting my flowers, my flower petals, and then I'll be back for the next steps. So I'm finishing up my flower, and I just wanted to say, don't be afraid to add more water if you feel like your paint is too thick. Add some water to it to thin it out, or glazing medium. Because this first layer isn't supposed to completely cover everything that you've already done. And don't be afraid to blot it off if you need to, if you feel like your paint is too thick still, especially right up around the edges. Add some water to it, blot it off, and then blend it back. So you can see I've painted the entire flower except for this one little section here. That's the part that you want to leave empty with just your first couple of layers, because this is actually going to be a very vivid, bright yellow. So we want to leave that as it is for now. Now that our first couple of layers are done, we get to really start adding some color and playing and having fun with this flower. So I'm just going to add some primary red and glazing medium to my palette. Actually, you want it to be about equal. Equal amounts of primary red and the glazing medium. You want to blend this really, really well to make sure that the glazing medium is really incorporated into your paint. Now I'm also going to spritz some water here, kind of off to the side, until I see if my glazing medium and paint mixture is thin enough. If it's not, I can always add a little bit of water either directly to my paintbrush or mix it in with my paint. But what you want to do is just take a tiny bit. You can see it's just the tiniest little bit on my paintbrush. And you want to start tapping and then feathering that paint into your flower. So I tapped it on, and now I'm like feathering it in. And you don't want to go all the way to the edge, you want to go almost to the edge. And you're going to be doing several layers of this. So kind of tap, 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 and then feather it in. okay? And you don't want any hard lines. You want to just blend it in and feather it in. So I'm going to add a little bit of water to my paint and glazing medium mixture here. I'm going to come over to this bigger feather. I mean bigger, bigger petal. Kind of do the same thing. Tap, tap, tap. You're kind of leaving the center of your flower yellow for now. We're going to come back in with some more colors, but for now you just want to leave it pretty much yellow. Because we're going to also add some glazing medium to this yellow and brighten the center up more too. So I'm barely touching my canvas with the paintbrush and just bringing this red up into the yellow a tiny bit, just some lines. You just don't want any hard edges to this red. You want it to be nice and blended into the yellow. And you want to just drag it up until your paintbrush is dry. So I've got plenty of paint here and I'm just kind of dragging it up to where my paintbrush runs out of paint. If it starts to get a little dry, I dabbed it on a little too soon. Might have to scrub a little bit. But you can always go back over it, add a little bit of water to it. You should be able to get rid of that with very little problem. And you want some variation in the color, so you want some leaves to have more red than others, and some leaves to have a more vivid red than others. So you're just kind of tapping it on and feathering it in, blending it up into the leaves. Don't be afraid to turn your painting if you need to as well. Or add water. Don't be afraid to add water. Especially if you find that your paint's just sitting there and not blending in. Add a little bit of water, wet it down, and blend it. And you want to keep all of your brush strokes going up. Remember, I said some leaves are going to be more red than others, and that's alright. So this leaf here is pretty much all red. This leaf is almost all red. This leaf has quite a bit of yellow. This one's quite a bit of yellow. These are, you know, about half and half. You don't want them to all be exactly the same. But you want to keep those brush strokes going up, up, up. Even if you're coming from the other side of the painting, you want to bring those brush strokes up. Even if you flip your painting upside down, you want to make sure that you keep your brush strokes going towards the top of the flower. When you're working on the smaller petals like this, you'll notice I started over here and tapped off my paintbrush and then came to work on this petal. That kind of helps you to not get too much paint on your smaller petals. Now all of your little flipped over pieces here, all of these little sections, you want to leave yellow. You don't want to add any red to those sections. Those are flipped over, curled parts of the leaf. So you want to leave those yellow. We're going to brighten those up with more yellow, and they'll take just the tiniest bit of red right on the outside edges. But for now, for this section, you just want to leave those yellow. You don't want to add any of this red to these smaller sections. If you get too much paint, wet your paintbrush and just blot it off. Go back into that red and kind of remove some of it. It's really, really easy to blend this in. So if you feel like you're being a little too heavy-handed, it's alright, just add some water to it. You can always blot it back off or go in there with your paintbrush and remove some of it. Just don't want it to look painted and perfect. You want it to be blended in. Don't want it to look like you just laid another layer of paint on top of what was already there. Doing this last petal right here. Now this petal I got a little bit too much of the yellow on, so I think I'm going to try and camouflage that with a bit more red. Plus these two flowers here have quite a bit of red, so I want to mimic that in the petal around it. So we're going to be creating layers here. What you want to do now is take your palette knife and mix up a third color. You're going to take a little bit of this red with the glazing medium in it and a little bit of your yellow and water and mix those together. You want a mostly reddish orange. And then you also want to do the same thing where you're creating a mostly yellowish orange. You still need some of the plain yellow, so don't use it all up. And then you want to create a color that's somewhere in the middle of both of those. So take a little bit of your yellowish orange and a little bit of your reddish orange and mix those together to create something in the middle. I need a little bit more yellow over here. So now you've already got your glazing medium added in here because it was mixed in with your red. But you are going to need to add a little bit of water. But you don't need to add the water until you get ready to work with each color. Oh no. So I'm just going to spritz each color with a little bit of water so that they stay moist. Now I want to start working with my lightest shade here. As a matter of fact, I'm going to blend a little bit more yellow right here on the side. I'm going to do the same thing, go back over it, more through the center this time. I've got quite a bit of paint here, so I'm just going to blot it off on a few of these petals. Now right through the center, you're going to start blending and feathering in this next shade. Again, keeping those brush strokes going up and down. Adding water if you need to. Never be afraid to add water. Just dip your paintbrush in your water cup and blend away. I'm actually going to blot this with some water so they don't dry and so that I can thin them out easier. If you feel like you get too much of this color, blot it off. Remember, keep your brush strokes going the same direction. If you get too heavy-handed with the paint, go back over it with some water and blot. And you just want to continue to blend these colors together. Now this is just play back and forth, layering on top of layering on top of layering until you get your petals the color you want them to be. You don't want it to look like you're laying one paint color on top of the other. So you're just going to keep adding layers until they all just blend together. And here with this glaze and yellow, you can use bigger strokes. And you want to kind of fill in those center areas of your flower. We're going to go back around these edges again with more of these darker colors. So right now you're focusing on the center of your petals. Everything else is going to get blended. I'm just going to keep continuing to add this light yellow all through my flower, adding water, blending it, blotting when I need to. So if you've gotten too much red, don't worry. Now is the time you're going to be fixing it. You can just go over it with some more of this lighter yellow. Now we want to go to our next color here. So we started with our really light yellow, and now we're going to go into this next shade here. It's just a bit more orange. And you're going to do that first technique again where you just go around the edges and blend it in, but you're going to come in just a bit from where you started last time. So you're working your way towards the center now. But you're not completely filling in the center. You're working your way towards the center, but never filling in the center and never going all the way to the edge again. So you're starting towards the center and then blending both out and towards the center again, but never getting to the edge and never touching the center again. With this orange color, this very, very light orange. You want to get almost to the center with this one. And then you may need to blot it off, especially on your smaller petals. And again, they're not going to all be the same. That's what you want. You want it to be blended and not all the same color. So you're starting further towards the middle than your last layer, but never quite filling in the middle. Keep wetting your paintbrush if you need to, adding more water to your paint. Blotting as necessary. Whoops. Now we're going to do the same thing again with our next shade, which is getting more towards the red again. And this time you're going to work almost on top of what you just did, but fanning out more towards the edge this time. Instead of fanning towards the center, you're going to fan towards the edge. And then blotting if you need to. And blending towards the center a little bit, just so you don't have hard edges. So we're gradually blending all these colors together, getting back to that dark red again. You have your dark red to begin with, which gives you some definition and shadows there and some more color. And then slowly blending the yellow and red together. You might find that you kind of lose those red lines. That's alright, we're going to go back and add them back in at the very end. You just want them there to begin with to create depth in those petals. You don't want to just start with the light color and work your way to the dark color, because then the dark color just lays on top. You want to have it there to begin with so that you're blending back to it. And remember, you're not coloring in these little tiny petals. You're only coloring your larger petals with all of these different shades of the yellows and reds. Those petals are going to be, those little petals are going to be much lighter. So by now your flower should start having several layers, and you should be creating quite a bit of depth here. So we're going to go to our next darkest shade, which is almost back to our original red. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to go exactly over where you just painted. Not quite as heavily. Got quite a bit of paint on my paintbrush this time. So you're going right around those same spots. And blending to the edge. Coming into the center, but blending to the edge. You want to use these light, feathery little brush strokes. You still want to bring it in towards the center, but really blending that edge. And if you can kind of create some little lines as you're going, that's going to help with the realism of your petals. So you can kind of just do some little wispy lines as you're blending here. And you want to do some a little heavier than others with the lines of the different shades of colors. So some may have more yellow, some may have more of the orange, some may have more of the red. You just want variation in your petals. Now right here in this center bud, this is actually going to be my darkest petal here. So I'm actually making like a little triangle or a V of the red, going all the way around the edge and just tapping the entire edge. And now I want my paintbrush really wet. I'm just going to drag this red into the center. And then blot right in the middle. There we go. Now we want to add some of our really dark shadows and colored areas. So I'm going to use Brilliant Purple. This is just Liquitex Basics, and I'm going to take it right over here with my red. I'm going to add some glazing medium, about equal parts, glaze and paint. Blend that together. Now this is actually a little bit too light, a little bit too much lavender, so we're going to go back to that phthalo blue that we used in our background and add just a drop of that to our purple to darken it a bit. And also to incorporate that blue into our flower, not just the background. Now we also want to take some of this red from our flower and blend that in. Again, you're going to add some water off to the side because you're going to be blending this in with your water, just like you have been for your other colors. Now you want to make sure you don't have too much paint on your paintbrush, and you're just going to go right at the base of each flower and add a little bit of this lavender. Just for some shading. And it kind of just follows the base and the edge. And then if you feel like it's too much, just blot some of it back off. And you can see already just how much that little bit of shadow is adding to your flower. Now you're only adding this to the base of your flowers. You're not going all back through the petals. You're not blending it into the whole flower. Just at the very edge of the petals, right at the base of the petals, you want to add in some of this lavender. Don't be afraid to blot it back off if you get too much. There we go. And you actually really just want to kind of create a U shape. just at the bottom of the flowers. Blending it up into the very center just a tiny bit. And more so on one side of the flower than the other. This one here is giving me some trouble. I think maybe I should turn my painting upside down. Don't be afraid to turn your painting. That's better. Remember, you're not coloring in those little ones. You're still just leaving those yellow. And some of these will have more purple than others. Now for this one, you won't really be able to make a U. You're just going to follow the shape of the flower. And I'm using such a light touch here. Now for this side of the flower, I think I'm going to bring the things around to the left. The shadows around to the left. So it's just going to be like on the outside edge of your petals. Some of your larger petals, you want to kind of bring that purple up into it a little bit. Just because there's more petal there to cover and shade. So just eyeball it, and if you feel like it needs more of a shadow, then just add a little bit more of the purple. Or like maybe to want more on one side than the other. And then right here in this center flower, again, is going to be your darkest spot. So you want plenty of water here, and you're just going to bring that purple about halfway up, all the way down to the base, and then blot it off and blend it in. Don't be afraid to just blot it all off and wet your paintbrush. Now we want to make our darkest shadow. So I have some of my phthalo blue here on my palette. And I'm going to take some more of this red. Not a lot, just a little bit. And you want to make a really deep purple. Actually, I need more red than that. And this is going to be the very darkest shadows. Okay, so maybe I need to start in the red. Somewhere in the middle maybe? There we go. Okay, so you just want to create a really deep purple, a bluish purple, to go with the background. And this is going to be your darkest shadows. So you want to spritz your water. You want the tiniest bit, and you want a really, really fine wash here. And you want to come in and add some really dark shadows on just a few of your petals. This petal's not dry, so I'm going to come back to that one. If you find that your paint's just not sticking, it's probably because your petal isn't dry enough. Your paint's not dry enough, and it's just one laying on top of the other, and that's not what you want. So you can see I'm just going right at the very base of each petal and just up a tiny bit on one side. You don't want to cover up that purple that you just added. You just want to darken it even more just at the base. Right where all of those petals connect. And we're actually going to still go back over that line with some black just to define the petals, but you don't want to just go from this light lavender to black. And you don't even have to do this on all the petals, especially right here in the front, just where they connect. You just don't want a hard line, just blend it in. And you can see again, this darker shadow is just giving so much depth to these petals. And just play with this part. You want some of them to have a darker shadow than others. And you can just kind of tap it into place on some petals. Just blend it up a little bit. Just where you think the shadows would be, the darkest shadows. Especially right around these little flipped up areas. You really want to start adding some of that really dark shadow just on the inside of the little flipped over areas. Because basically your flower petal has curled, and so it's flipped here, and you need that dark shadow defined right there along the edge of that curled tip. So right in the base of your petals, got a little bit too much there. Just blot it off. Add some water, blend it up. And then right along these curved little bits. Make sure you keep your paint wet here. You want to wash, not a thick layer of paint. So you might have to keep adding some water, playing with it a little bit. At this point, the more you can make the paint like a watercolor, the better the effect is going to be. Now you just want to make sure you go back around the edge of all of these little flipped up petals. Make sure you have good dark shadows there, but not hard lines. You want it blended. I'm very happy with this. So now I just want to take that original glaze that we made, that plain yellow with a little bit of white added to it. Remember we sprayed it with some water and then we added some glaze to it. I'm going to add a tiny bit more white. And we're going to blend that together with the yellow. I think my camera died. I'm not really sure what happened, but all I did was I took my light pastel yellow that we mixed up. I made a very, very thin wash, and then I went over all of my little flipped up flower petal tips just over the edge of those. You want to make sure you don't cover up your shadow, and you only want to go over the little flipped up tips of your petals. If you can't remember, if you're not sure, if you've kind of lost your lines here in your flower, then just go back to your original and you can see exactly where all these little tiny flipped over edges are. And that's what you want to go over with this little pastel yellow. You want to just brighten these tips up. We're getting ready to go over them again, so don't worry if they look really vibrant right now. It's okay, we're getting ready to cover them up a little bit. Okay, so we have our light pastel yellow, and now we need to blend that in with the rest of our regular flower. So you want to take some of this medium orange that we have and we made a wash with, and you want to blend that in with your pastel yellow a little bit, and then go right back over those little petals again with that blend of the orange and pastel. So by going over this first with the pastel, you really lighten it up and brighten it up, but then you're going back with the orange to make it more cohesive and make it blend in with your actual flower again. Once you've gone over that one time with your pastel, and then one time with your light orange, let it dry completely, because it may darken down a little bit and you may find that it's the color that you want it to be. However, if it still looks too bright or too, almost white, then you just want to go back over it with another wash of the orange mixed with the yellow, and you can add a little bit more of this darker orange into your yellow to create a slightly darker shade. But you really want these flipped over tips to be highlighted and to stand out against the color of your actual flower. And if it's really too white, then just go over it with a wash of just the orange by itself, this medium orange here. Just go over it with just a really thin wash of that orange by itself, and you can see the difference in this little petal versus these little petals. So I'm just going to go over this really quickly. Depending on the shade of your flower, you may not need to do this step. You may not need to go back over it again with the darker orange by itself. But my flower is fairly dark, so I need my tips to be a little bit darker than they were. But if your flower is already fairly light colored, then you may be okay with just the first layer of pastel and orange on top of it. That's better. Now, because we have added this really bright color up in the top of our flower, you don't want it just in one spot on your painting. So now you're going to come back with just that wash of the pastel and highlight right into the center of a few of your petals. Just the tiniest bit, and then blot it back off and blend it in. As a matter of fact, I'm going to use a slightly larger paintbrush, back to the one that I was using before. You can actually kind of rub it with your towel. When you're rubbing, you want to follow the shape of your petal. And you only want to go into the lightest spots. And highlight just a little bit. And if your wash is thin enough, you may not have to wipe it back off. So what I did was I just took and highlighted some of the areas that were really bright yellow, that first yellow that we used on our flower. You could still see some of that popping through. So that's basically where I went over with the really pastel yellow. And you can see now this flower looks amazing. I'm so happy with this. The last thing you want to do before we outline it is to take your red that you mixed up over here, your orangey red, and you want a really, really thin wash of this. Super thin wash. And now you just want to go, remember how we dotted and then blended? You just want to kind of do that around the edge of these little flipped over pieces. So you want to blend that red to the edge and towards the center of these little flipped over pieces. And that's going to make them where they're not just plain little orange bits sticking up there. That's going to finish off these little pieces and blend them into the rest of your flower. And I'm actually just kind of dotting and scribbling and, you know, just kind of blending this little bit of red over the top of this orange just so it's not flat looking. You know, I've got some little streaks of red popping through, but not really, and you know, it just makes your petals have so much more dimension and makes them not look flat like they're just these little orange tabs that you stuck on top of your petals. And you want some of these to have more red than others, just like you did with the petals. Some of these little flipped over pieces should have more red than others. Beautiful. Okay. So our flower is completely painted now. The last thing we have to do to our flower is go back and redefine some of these edges. So what you want to do is take a super fine paintbrush. You can use a fine liner for this or just a really tiny paintbrush. And you want to either make a really deep purple, so either add a little bit of black to this darker bluish purple that we made, or you can just use some dioxazine purple, which is what I'm going to do. You want to thin that out with some water. Not necessarily a wash, but you definitely want it inky. Once you get a nice inky consistency, I'm going to take this tiny paintbrush and define all of your lines. You don't want to use solid black here because you don't want that really harsh black line. We don't have any black on our painting, and then to go through and add black is just going to make a hard line, which is what we've tried to avoid through the whole painting. I mean, you can use black if you want, go ahead, but if you want your painting to still have that painterly look without the really harsh black lines, then you want to use paint, a really thinned paint, and you want to use it in a color that you've already used, which we've already used purple, and just go back over and define all of your little petals. Now, if that line still looks too harsh, put it on and then blot it off. You just need to be extremely careful not to blot onto your petal because it will mess up your petal. So blot it on and then step away. Don't keep blotting. And then find another spot on your towel or let it sit and dry for a little bit before you go back and blot more. And you just want these lines to be painted on there, but not harsh lines. And that inky consistency is going to allow you to really get some thin lines on there without them being too harsh. And the blotting is really going to just remove any harshness at all. And you know, give you the color without the hard line. See anywhere that needs a shadow, like a really dark shadow, go ahead and add that in right now too. And at this point, do not be afraid to turn your painting. You've come this far, you don't want to mess it up now. So turn your painting if you need to. I'm going to work here on the top, and then I'm going to turn my painting when I get ready to work on those little bottom petals, I think. But we'll see. If you feel comfortable with it, and if you feel like you can have control, then you don't need to turn your painting. But if you feel like you can't follow the lines as well, then turn it. And you can see how much I'm pushing in with this towel to blot off this paint, because you really want to define the lines, but not really. And I don't know if you can tell it, but I'm turning my towel. If I have to blot more than once, I'm actually turning my towel so I get a different spot. That way I don't take the chance of blotting over one spot and then blotting it again and getting that blot mark somewhere else on my flower. And if it seems like you're blotting and you're still not getting enough paint off, press harder and really like soak up in that flower. That didn't make any damn sense, did it? Press harder and really soak up the paint. So I'm going to finish outlining my flower, and then I will be back to show you the finished product. With the outlining, you just want to go back and double check and make sure you have outlined every line of your painting. And if some of them don't look defined enough, add a little bit more purple. But you want to make sure that you've oh my god. Don't stick your finger in your palette. If you do, it's no big deal. You just wet it and wipe it off. See, I ruined my paintings at the very end too. So, if you feel like you messed it up, just wet it, wipe it off, keep going. Okay, anyway, what I was saying was, you just want to make sure that you have every one of your lines defined, and if it looks like there's not enough shading or not enough definition on a specific line, go back over it now and make sure you have every little line completely defined. Okay, final steps now. We want to go back into this pastel yellow, and we need to paint this center. We need to brighten it up first though. So you want to take that pastel yellow, and you want to make sure it's a wash, well, not a wash, but you know, kind of wet. You want it to be able to smear and spread. If it feels like it's thick or like maybe your paint has started to dry out a little bit, then you want to just add some water to it so that it's nice and blendable. You can see mine's kind of watery here, and I'm able to just spread it out. And I'm a fussy painter, so I need a tiny paintbrush here. If you go over your purple line a little bit, that's okay, because we're going to actually go back and define this one still anyway. Okay, once you have that center painted, you want to let it dry completely. Then once it's dry, you want to go back to that very first yellow that we used, and you want to make a wash of that, and then go back over this pastel with that more vivid yellow. Now you may have to play with this color a little bit. It may not work now because you've got so many layers of color. You don't even really see this yellow anymore. So this yellow may not work for the center of your flower. You may have to work with it a little bit. But let it dry completely before you make that decision, because it's going to dry slightly different than it looks when it's wet. But you still want this bright yellow on there to give it that brightness underneath any other color you may go back over the top of it with. Again, if you color over your purple line, that's okay, because we have to redefine it anyway. Now that it's dry, I can tell that this yellow really is just not working. So I'm wetting my paintbrush, and I'm going to just reactivate this orange. Well, not reactivate it because it's acrylic. You can't really reactivate it, but I've still got some on there that's not completely dry. So I'm just going to blend this together and make a nice thin wash. And I'm going to go back over this with this orange. Just to make it blend in with the flower a little bit more, and then blot it back off. Which kind of tones down the yellow and brings it all together, because you've got the same color here in the center as you have in the rest of your flower, which is going to help just bring it all together. So then blot it off. There we go. From this point, you can fill in the center here with a more vivid color. You can go over it with a completely different color just to to add in some more effects to it, I actually think I'm going to take some quinacridone nickel azo, which is not on your supply list because, you know, I'm using very, very little of this, and it's a very expensive paint. So it's not something that you need to go out and purchase. However, it is a gorgeous color. And I'm just going to take that right into the center of my flower and make a wash and just kind of let it melt into this yellow here. And these are just some of the things that you can do later on to your flower, but they're not on the supply list because I didn't see the sense in requesting you guys get nickel azo if we're only using it for the center of a friggin' flower. Now I'm going to blot it real quick. I'm probably going to do a couple of layers of this so that it's not so flat looking. Now, because I did not put it on the supply list, if you don't have quinacridone nickel azo gold, you can use burnt sienna. It's not really the same color, but it's close and it'll work in a pinch. And it's going to give you that, excuse me, that richness that you want here in the center of your flower. So I'm just dabbing it on and then wetting it down, letting it kind of fall into the little nooks and crannies. And then just tapping to blot it off a little bit. I'm probably going to do this, you know, 3 or 4 times at least until I start getting some of that richness into the center of the flower. And the longer you let it set on there, the less it's going to come off. So I'm just blotting it on, and you can do the same thing with a wash if all you have is the acrylic paints. Start with a wash and then add more water to it. And again, this is just preventing hard lines, and it's making it a little bit more organic, which is what you want with floral images. You don't want it to look like you just colored on there. You want it to look natural. So you can see I'm barely tapping to blot it off, which is leaving color more so in some areas than in others. You just want to make sure you don't have any hard lines. Okay, I let that dry completely that last time, and I'm just going to go over it one more time with the quinacridone nickel azo. And again, if you don't have this color, you can totally use burnt sienna. It's a good substitute. It's not quite the same, but it will give you this warmth and richness that you need to cover up this bright yellow. Now I think this time I'm going to try to blot it off without wetting it and just see what happens. Yeah, it needs to be a little bit wet. I think I'm just going to spritz it this time. That way it's not quite as wet and not quite as much of my paint will come off. Oh yeah, that's much better. And then just blot, blot, blot. If you find that your paint's a little bit too dry, spritz it again, press a little harder. It'll come off as long as you don't wait too long and let it really start drying on there. If it starts to get too dry, just go back over it with your paintbrush. Kind of blend it all in. Gorgeous, love it. Now we want to define those last couple lines with that purple again, the dioxazine purple, that inky liquidy dioxazine purple. Line it on, blot it off, just like you did before. And this time you want to make sure you go around the line of the center of your flower, which we skipped before. At least I did. You may have gone ahead and done it, which was smart. I did not. Ta-da! Our lotus flower painting is complete. I love this. I love the way it turned out. Now, this is where we stop with the painting. But at this point, you can decide to darken in your center a little bit more. You could put micro beads in there. You could put ink in there, glitter, anything you want. You can draw little swirls coming out around your lotus flower. You can put text up here. Pretty much the sky is the limit from this point on. I wanted to teach you how to do this lotus flower, teach you these techniques so that you can use this later on in other projects and other paintings that you're going to create. But for this lotus flower painting, this course is all about you and what you're awakening to. So I don't really want to put any more text or images on here because we're each on our own journey, and I don't want my journey to kind of sway what you may put on your painting. So from this point forward, either leave your lotus painting as it is, or you can put on there what you're awakening to, or just awakening, or some other text that means something to you, or go in and glitterify and microbead up your lotus flower, whatever. Okay, so if you have any questions, leave it in the Facebook group. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. I hope you liked doing this painting as much as I did. You can still go back and do the edges of your painting a little bit more. That's the last thing I'm going to do to my painting, is actually go around and do like a dark purple border, I think. But other than that, I'm done with my lotus flower. If you have any questions, post it in the Facebook group. Please share your photos of your paintings, even works in progress, any little snippets or sneak peeks at what you're doing. Tell us about it, share it in the Facebook group, ask questions there, and hang out with all of us, and let's all go through this process together. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today. Remember, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, all over the internet, my website, www.mixedmediology.com. And if you follow me on those places, I will follow you back. Thanks so much for being here today, and I will see you in the group. Mwah. Bye!